becomes a grift,
But the fact it's coming from the Equalities Minister, that's her job, and she's basically saying this is not the answer.
And she has also raised up a white man by marrying him as well. A poor, unworthy Scot, I believe, has been Mr Badenoch, who
Good
was...
for him.
yeah, absolutely. Anyway, we wish her well, obviously, our next Prime Minister. Let's move on to the Metro, Steve.
First cyber flasher jailed. This is a man who sent naked images of himself to a 15-year-old.
That's a photo in there, but that's not the photo he wanted to use.
No, that's true.
That one.
Unless it's a cutaway T-shirt. It's to a 15-year-old. That's icky and what a wrong-un. He also sent the picture to a 60-year-old, proving he doesn't have a type. But it's weird, isn't it? It's weirder. It's right. It's no better. It's both wrong, but also weird, that age.
And were they sent email, on Twitter, DM?
Using WhatsApp. But this, if you get in the details of the story, he's already been found guilty of doing stuff. He had to use his dad's phone, so it would have been his dad's number. So
I'm a little uneasy with this cyber flasher idea, because sending crude, vulgar nudes or whatever through the various online platforms is not a new thing. Maybe the prosecution is new.
Well, that's exactly what's new, because I mean, I got to be honest, I've never understood it. Maybe I entered the dating scene a bit earlier than this became fashionable. I've never understood what someone gets from sending the DP. I just don't understand it as a...
But they do seem to be exchanged.
My wife hasn't seen mine.
No, I agree with you. I totally understand and also sympathise. But I do believe, I might be wrong, but I do believe that the exchange of such pictures is welcomed when it's consensual, that there are... It's not as if this is always... It's not like if you're a flasher in a park, that is prima facie an offence regardless of who... Do you know, there's no legitimate...
So do you think this is for lazy flashers, essentially?
Well, I'm just saying cyber flasher seems to be an odd term, really. It just... I don't know. It's like...
Maybe they're agoraphobic.
Yeah.
Cyber flasher is just the tabloid term, though. The actual rule that you're breaking the law, that Southend's magistrates was found guilty of sending photographs or films of genitals to cause alarm, distress or humiliation. Yeah. That, I actually don't think is a good description of it. I don't think you would have been trying to cause alarm, distress or humiliation. He would have been
hoping to cause involuntary arousal, wouldn't he? That's presumably... Yeah. Although they are those people who say... I mean, the flasher in the park, that was always associated with a sort of mental illness whereby you wanted to... It was an act of violence.
Yeah,
exactly. So there was that,
So I think there is that element.
But I think this list of motivations aren't exhaustive.
Anyway, 1-1 for religion and science.
Good.
So
Lock
far.
him up.
What about The Guardian, Josh?
Social media blamed for surge in young people hit by midlife crisis. They're getting too many DPs. Is possibly what it's about. Yeah, Global Wellbeing Survey finds 15 to 24-year-olds less happy than older generations, which is kind of a flip, because as someone going through the midlife crisis right now...
Are you?
I am indeed.
How old are you?
48. Yeah, so
good luck with that as the midpoint.
Don't tell me it gets worse. Oh, my gosh.
They do say your 40s is the dip, is the hammock, isn't it? I think there was something to that, although there are certain things that depend on, like, when do you have children? The old saying, life begins at 40, wasn't ridiculous because people had children at 20 and they regain their independence at 40. Now, basically, you're still in the midst, usually, of birthing them at 40.
Well, yeah, but I want to be like you. I want to have given up.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the stage
You've got to relax into it.
That's right.
What I would say is it's not a midlife crisis just because they're unhappy. There are different flavours, but a midlife crisis is a very specific thing, and it's not to be completely...
It's a real phenomenon.
Yeah, it can be miserable, and what it essentially amounts to is a dawning awareness, a really quite gnawing awareness that your options have narrowed, that you've made choices, and there was a time when every choice you made seemed to open up a couple of new doors.
But maybe this is then. Maybe because maybe they all think they're going to die in about 15 years.
Wow,
so actually they could be right.
Yeah, in that risk. But we have another thing about mental health in the young. But carry on.
Just to attack this story, they're blaming social media because someone in America keeps blaming social media for it all the time. Yeah. There's not a lot of evidence that looks at this. No. You can find that there's an issue with using Instagram that impacts the mental health of young girls. There's very little data to back the rest of it up. It's just that young people use it a lot and they're miserable. Well, guess what? They also
if you
can't...
look at phone usage and phone ownership by young people, there's definitely a correlation between
No correlation. Yeah, maybe correlation, not causation. They also can't afford housing.
Don't use your big words with me, Steve.
I know when my daughter was, she's 19 now, I remember when she was first starting to use Instagram a lot and I was a bit anxious, but whenever I looked at them, all her friends were going, oh, you look great, babe, and stuff. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you can get bullied, but actually it was a wonderful support group. We have created a world in which young people do not get to physically hang out with one another. They don't get to explore a radius around their own home. You know, I remember our kids playing on Minecraft, and I was like, this is great, because he's got a headset on and he's with his mate in some fantasy environment, you know, But no, he's like out. He's out of the house in his head. I think that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. But I just wanted to underline that point, that older people who are happy got to buy a house for £1,000 and now it's worth £1 million. Young people who are told the planet's ending and you'll never do anything with your life are upset for some reason. Let's blame the phones.
They're adapting to it by going online, that's true. That's it for part one. In part, are we going to do... Oh, did you want to do the mirror? Yeah, OK, very quickly. We've got 50 seconds.
All right. Kate's medical record security breach.
It is a
the hospital.
story.
Yeah, the hospital that she was in. Some staff tried to access it. Of course they did. Just because working in the media, have people getting in touch saying, have you got any rumours? No, because I don't care. We shouldn't care, but the world is obsessed with where this woman is.
They should be entitled to it. That's a perk, surely, of working in medicine, is that you should be able to look up famous people's medical records, surely.
I kind of think that the Buckingham Palace should have a mini hospital in it, shouldn't it? They shouldn't have to go into... It's not surely in an hospital.
That's why she's gone missing. She's on a waiting list somewhere.
Anyway, we wish her best. Part 38, that's it for part one. In part two, we've got Hamza Yusuf's war on comedy. King's Cross takes a turn for the Crescent. And fake news, or as it's officially called, the BBC. We will see you shortly after the break.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
I've got an idea. I think that all 30-year-olds should be given £10,000 from the banks of baby boomers. We've got a situation in this country now where millennials are the first generation in modern times expecting to be poorer than their parents. We, as 30-year-olds like me, are half as likely to own a house as people my age 30 years ago. In fact, the cost of a home in Britain, compared to average incomes, has as big a gap today as it did, wait for it, in the 1860s. It is a Dickensian situation.
Now, I'm sorry about the housing crisis for your generation.
You're not, though, are you? Because you're profiting from it.
I'm profiting from it. Don't be ridiculous.
The house prices now, compared to that period.
If this is the case, Benjamin...
Have incomes gone up that fast?
To penalise and punish the elderly when they have worked all their lives to put into the system and say it's your fault, whingy, whiny, we're going to be envious...
we're being punished.
No, well, by the politics, so be the change you want to see in the world.
Taxes, I am actually, and I'm about to tell you about the change I want to see in the world.
Are you good? As long as it's not whining about it.
I'm going to stop whining about it, but we are being taken advantage of at the moment to profit, to help the old. Most of taxpayers' money is spent in two departments, the NHS, so the health department, and the Department for Work and Pensions. Those departments disproportionately serve the older population. Now, I've got no issue with that, but let's not pretend that it is not young working people that is paying for the public services for old people. So actually, we are having it hard, and I just look at the future, and we see a future of perpetually higher taxes to pay for this increasing ageing population, a shrinking labour force, and you're here saying we've got nothing to worry about.
The young stop voting for mass immigration parties. The young stop voting for parties that don't build houses.
Immigrants actually pay taxes, pensioners don't.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GBNews, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
And welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans. GB Funny Boys, Josh Howie and Steve N. Allen are on call, so we're going to dig into the meat of the stuff now. We kick off with The Guardian and a story about Gaza Food Aid, one of Geldof's less popular festivals. Josh?
UN says Israeli restrictions on Gaza food aid may constitute a war crime. So they're talking here about a potential famine. Now, to be very clear, Israel is stating that twice the amount of food is going in than before October 7th. So the issue isn't about food going through, it's about the food being processed, and it's about, there's 300,000 civilians, or Gaza's, but civilians including Hamas, outside of Rafah, up in the north, which has been split. And I think the issue seems to be about getting that aid to them, and that is a war zone. So the problem is that the UN has an agenda. Some of the UN, there are different parts of the UN. It's a large organisation. UNRWA, part of the UN, is arguably a wing of Hamas. There are UNRWA members who took part in October 7th. So there obviously is an issue here, but it's just saying that it's Israel's fault, I don't believe is the case, because Hamas has been proven to take this food and they're not distributing it.
It's difficult, Steve, isn't it, that the UN's credibility does seem to be somewhat compromised on this, because there's no foreign journalists really in there at the moment, or certainly no British ones that we know and recognise and trust.
Well, that's the thing. You need the stats, you need the data for this, don't they? I suppose one way would be to have some sort of measure of how much food is going in that is reported and recorded somehow. Then that would solve.
But that is being recorded.
Well, the IPCC is measuring the level of hunger to be close to famine.
I know, but the point is that the food is going in and there's overcapacity. So Israel's saying you can put as much food as you want, bring it all in. It's nearly double the amount that went in before October 7th. So the problem isn't getting the food in, it's getting the food to the people. And then it goes via Hamas. That seems to be the problem. Would it
be, I understand the doubling it since before October the 7th, but did they have an internal supply before October the 7th that's been wiped out? Or was there...
No,
we're not talking about... No, OK. Like that, no. So it's all the same, but we are comparing like with like. Continuing on to the Scottish Daily Express, celebrated prig Humza Yousaf has it in for comedians. To quote every article ever, this is no laughing matter.
Yep. So this is Humza Yousaf's dangerous, in quote marks, hate crime bill will target actors and comedians. So no, in answer to those questions, I will not be doing Edinburgh this year. So they've leaked some details of the training that Police Scotland are getting, and apparently cops will be allowed to arrest comedians if they are reported for communicating threatening or abusive material.
Yeah.
Because we live in the time we live in, people will definitely report. If they don't like it, they will report to say that they found it abusive.
They've already been reporting it, just to the owners of the venues and so on.
Yeah, but now they know you can call the police and say, oh, I felt threatened by this joke.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, it'll be arrested under this new legislation, which comes in on April the 1st, which is perfect. But it's comedy. If ever there's an area where you should be allowed to say something that you may or may not mean, you should be able to satirise or lampoon.
I mean, the reality of being a stand-up comedian is that there's always a mix, a balance. Some tend to be more spontaneous and ad-lib, and others tend to be more on rails, and I quite hold my hand up and say, generally speaking, know roughly what I'm going to say when I go on stage. But you've got to have the freedom to just, like, blurt something inappropriate and, you know...
And fail.
Yeah, exactly, and have the audience kind of tell you, well, that wasn't very funny, you know, and then you kind of, like, try and get it back.
It's a conversation with the audience, and you find each other's levels. But this is obviously very concerning. What's maybe even sadder, though, is that I don't think many comics will fall foul of it. The way that comedy's been going over the last however many years is that it doesn't push boundaries, it doesn't antagonise people, which personally is what I enjoy doing with my set. And so I think a lot of comics can be very safe. Following back from, we have someone like Jerry Sadowitz, who did push the line, seeing what happened to him and his literal cancellation 2 years ago, to see the cowardly and pathetic response from our colleagues and people like, and I'm going to call him out, Stuart Lee, one of my favourite comics, but his response, and he cites Jerry Sadowitz as one of his big influences, and he was a coward, pathetic, and didn't stand up. And if Stuart Lee, who's sort of, in a way, kind of a leader of the circuit of comics, many comics looking up to him, if he'd taken a stand at that point, people would have followed him, and they didn't.
I'm afraid you're right, and I also would say that the Edinburgh Fringe seems to be intent on shooting itself in as many different parts of its own foot as it can. I mean, obviously rent is a massive deal now, and that's as a result of SNP legislation, which may have been well-intentioned, but seems to have killed the sort of subletting market that people relied on. And the other thing that's happening in the Edinburgh Fringe, which I will just mention, is the degree, because it's relevant here, the degree, which is perhaps a natural thing over the course of a long-running festival, to which power is being consolidated in a handful of very successful venues, very successful agencies taking up a number of acts. They will have the money, the power, to vet, essentially, and to drill. And this is going to hit any kind of dissidents that are outside of it, yeah.
Just on this story, this hate crime bill has been disagreed with by some performers, including the right-wing firebrand hate peddler Mr Bean actor Rowan Atkinson.
Yeah.
So if he's against
he's always been very good about stuff.
No, he is good. Be interesting to see what Frankie Boyle has to say about it. On to the Telegraph. Noted distributors of misinformation have apologised for doing what they do best.
Yeah, BBC apologises for calling the Reform Party far-right. So this is leader Richard Tice. He says he's very pleased. And he says it was a tactic to smear the party. And arguably, you can't really deny that is true. Obviously, this is part of a wider movement where anybody within the left of the spectrum would sort of say anything is far right that disagrees with their ideology.
Well, they would certainly... I mean, I suppose they say the Reform Party probably would characterise itself as broadly to the right of Sunak. Yeah. So I suppose that is...
But far right suggests neo-Nazis.
Yes, absolutely. And hard right does as well, doesn't it? In a way that hard left and far left never seem to...
Well, but I think people are waking up to particularly how toxic the far left is.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, if you want a male rapist, if you don't want male rapists in female jails, suddenly you're far right. You know, there's this kind of, like, if you want to control immigration, you're far right.
Yeah.
And this has been something that's kind of been pushed through it now. But when it comes through the BBC, which is meant to be impartial, that's where the danger lies, because people take that forward and they go, oh, respect. And they've got 14% of the vote, supposedly, at the moment in the latest polling. They're just behind...
Well, this is it. I mean, there are different ways you could talk about it. I certainly don't think of them as far right. But then again, I remember when the Tory party would have regarded most of their core manifesto as being fairly core Tory values. You know, but... there is that feeling everyone has, that a lot of stuff has shifted to the left. The centre ground seems to be huddled ever closer around a handful of liberal left orthodoxies.
Yeah, it's not in, like, the recent couple of months or years. I mean, the phrase swivel-eyed loons was around in the David Cameron era. But I am going to disagree with your analysis of this story.
Okay.
The phrase far-right was used by the Press Association, and it was text that was copied into the BBC article.
Right.
The BBC apologised for it, and the PA apologised for it. But guess who were attacking? There's no political gain to be made from attacking the Press Association, so we're attacking the BBC.
The Press Association is often the root of a lot of problems, of course. You're absolutely right.
They made the mistake, and it was copied and corrected by both parties, and then both apologised.
But would we say... So you said...
Good investigating there, Steve. Well done.
I don't know whether
Darn
it is
you,
true.
PA.
If you say it's 17% of the vote or
14,
whatever...
yeah.
What would you say be the far left and far right? Would you do it in those terms, or do you think it has to be policy? Could you say that the furthest 3%, would that be roughly what you would say would be the far right?
Oh, you think it's like a normal distribution?
Yeah,
bell curve?
I think it is, broadly speaking.
I think there's about 200 to 300,000 far left cranks.
Yeah, right. So about 3 standard deviations from the centre. Yeah, OK, that's good to know. Forward that to the PA.
And they all hate me. Hi, guys.
I will say, though, I will push back a little bit. I know what you're saying, but I think it behoves the BBC to decide for themselves whether or not the Press Association...
Yeah, I'm going to go with Simon on this.
Well, but then you'd require the BBC to not be using PA copy, and they do, and they accidentally copy that bit across. You're right. They shouldn't call them far right, and they don't think they're far right, and
they shouldn't just be cutting and pasting either. That's the Daily Mail now, Steve, and an Islamic verse has been broadcast on a message board at King's Cross Station. King's Cross. And so is Twitter.
King's Cross Station faces backlash after Islamic message appears on its boards. They showed a hadith of the day on the platform. They're the live notice boards that you get. It said, the Prophet Muhammad said, all the sons of Adam are sinners, and the best sinners are those who repent often, which is good. I do every day and still do it the next day.
The Prophet Muhammad Piba.
Yes, well, is that the full surname?
Yeah.
I've not gone blind yet, though, so keep doing it. But the King's Cross bosses have hit back at critics, saying, we do this for Ramadan, Easter, Christmas, Passover, Diwali. We'll stop doing that too. You're a train station.
Yeah.
How about you pay attention to trains?
Absolutely.
Try and get that right instead of doing the other stuff. Because you can't be inclusive of everyone.
No.
Where's the Shintoism quote? Where's the Scientology?
There's the quote there. You know what? The problem with that quote is that it sort of says that we're all... It's a bit...
Yeah, it's quite
nasty.
heavy.
Not very
It's
nice.
contentious. It's
Basically
got a bit of
saying
Old
that
Testament.
we're all
fire, isn't it?
sinners. All of us are sinners, but Muslims are the least sinners because they represent...
I don't even like... I think if you must have a little we've got epigram of some sort, something vaguely inspirational or even poetic or funny or something. But yeah, having a verse from a contentious book. I mean, you know, let's not pretend. Not only in this country but around the world, Islam. Even within Islam, there are divisions, you know. So it's not like something you can just put up on a train station as like Happy Christmas.
Yeah, they argue that it's to increase inclusivity, and it won't do that either. No. I guarantee you, no one's ever turned up to King's Cross and thought, I won't get on that train because they've not said anything about Whitsuntide.
No,
we don't need an invite. You presume it's a train, so focus on the trains. Try and do that right.
Although sometimes when you go in front of a tube station, they've written like inspirational quotes on the little billboards.
Yes.
Sometimes you get that. That's always quite nice. But yeah, I agree with you. Either do it for all religion, or ideally,
don't do it for all religions.
Or do it, or just don't do it.
Yeah.
But
you can't do all of them.
They've kind of said, oh, we do it for all religions. I go through King's Cross a lot. I've never seen that before on that board, ever.
No.
No one's put up any photo evidence of it. I personally think that they're being a bit like, yeah, we do loads of stuff, and they're not basically telling the truth here after the fact.
Well, let's see how that transpires.
And I think, by the way, it's good that we're kicking up a stink. People go, oh, look at you, you're making a big hoo-ha about it. Just let things happen. No, we have to, for whatever the religion was being put up there, we have to kick up a stink because hopefully they'll learn the lesson and stop it.
Agree.
We're a liberal democracy.
Seventh-day Adventists only get theirs on bus replacement services. It's not fair.
But you're right. Secular values are often weakly defended because it's assumed that they have arisen from a consensus, unlike Christianity, which, you know, maybe at some point had to have a few people burnt at the stake before everyone knuckled down. But yeah, we've made ourselves very weak and vulnerable to stronger, you know, more forceful and aggressive ideologies. That's the fear.
As an atheist, where's my card?
Yeah. I will sort one out for you, Steve. On to the Telegraph now. 1 in 5 Muslim prisoners, as we stay with Islam, is white, which is... Well, is the halal lunch really the best option? Is that what it is?
Well, no, I don't know if it is. So, yeah, 1 in 5 Muslim prisoners is white amid fears that Islamic gangs are driving conversion. So this is Ministry of Justice data. But it's the first time they've ever managed to combine religion and ethnicity. And, yeah, 20% were white, about 3,000 people. And there's quite a few interesting elements to this because there was a report last year or 2 years ago, actually, saying that different, like, Muslim terrorists had, taken control of wings, and they had actually even had their own Sharia court, and that prison staff were basically concerned about racism, wherever we've seen that before, so they weren't fighting back about this stuff.
Yeah.
And they're saying that there's this possibility that some white prisoners are going in and it's a way of getting protection.
Yeah.
But they this is one of my favourite articles, which basically undermines itself at the end, where they go, oh, by the way, half of those 3,000 were actually from Albania, and Albania is a Muslim country. So it's probably 10% of it, and there probably is some truth to it. But I will say there's another thing here. 15,000 Muslim prisoners are in jail, with only, which is 18% of the jail population. There's only 6,000 Muslims. So we're talking 3 times the Muslim population. I mean, more likely to commit crimes. Well, I'm just saying, those are facts.
Typical white man trying to take over everything.
We are running out of time in this section, sadly, but stay with us. After the break, we'll have Damien Hirst in a pickle, Cambridge College Choir.
Hi there, welcome to the latest GB News forecast from the Met Office. Cloud will thicken for many of us over the next 24 hours, turning damp, but the rain does ease later on. Now, we're going to see a weather system approach from the southwest, associated with an area of low pressure that's forming at the moment. And that's going to push a finger of rain into much of Wales, southwest England, and then overnight Northern Ireland, southern, eventually central Scotland, as well as parts of the Midlands and East Anglia. Now, the far southeast, likely to stay mainly dry, 10 Celsius here, and the far northwest of Scotland also Dry with clear spells, a touch of frost as we start off Wednesday. That's the best place for any bright weather first thing. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover. Those spells of rain continuing through the morning, turning heavy for a time across parts of Wales and northern England before eventually the rain fragments and pulls away. But it does tend to stay damp across this central swathe of the UK. A few showers elsewhere, but actually Western Scotland, Northern Ireland brightening up nicely, feeling fresh here, but feeling warm in the southeast where there will be some afternoon sunshine and highs of 18 Celsius. Thursday's a very different day. We start the day with outbreaks of heavy rain across the northwest. Strong winds moving in as well. The rain spreading across Northern Ireland and Scotland during the morning and early afternoon. Thickening cloud across England and Wales, but the rain not arriving here until much later on. Friday, a return to sunny spells and blustery showers, the heaviest downpours towards the northwest.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the second half of Headliners. Onto the Telegraph now with a story preaching to the choir, except the choir has been replaced with a Council Estate drill collective.
Cambridge College scraps church choir to make way for more diverse musical genres. I'm not posh, so I don't know if it's St John's College or maybe St John's. You never know with these people, do you?
No, St John's.
St John's College. And it will be cut down on the numbers of chapel services. Firstly, you get diversity by adding to rather than taking away, as a general rule, I suppose. And if ever there should be a place for stuffy, boring, outdated performances that's bland, it's a Cambridge College, isn't it? That's what it should be doing. And let's do the this wouldn't happen the other way around argument, because that might have some legs on it. You don't get the O2 Academy in Brixton cancelling some performances so you can have a cantata. So one student said that the British choral tradition is something St John's should be leading, not diminishing. I kind of understand it. There are other places for other music. If ever you want stuffy people who went to Cambridge, you find them in Cambridge.
I suppose it's a question, I don't know, of resources and commitment and enthusiasm. Probably a lot of these things happen on a voluntary basis, and perhaps they're struggling to maintain the choir on that level. I don't know. What do you think?
Maybe, yeah, and budget cuts, and this is now one of the articles where they basically undermine themselves in the last bit where they go, oh, St John's Voices was founded in 2013, as opposed to the long-standing St John's College Choir, which is the one that's been going for like 400 years.
Because it was men only before. They had to rebrand it with the
now
girls.
the other one has gone women.
I mean, how much more diversity you want? They let women in now.
Yeah.
So, but this is going to start releasing a cappella Christmas songs like the Flying Pickets or something.
Flying Pickets. No, a cappella Ramadan.
A cappella Ramadan.
Songs, yeah. And sing
that feels like a doo-wop mashup I want to hear. On to the Metro now. It turns out being a miserable, censorious, po-faced neo-Marxist scold is linked to unhappiness.
Strange. Yeah. Being woke is linked to unhappiness, anxiety and depression, study finds. This is quite a confusing article. It's based in a study in Finland where so he's trying to sort of apply it to America. But he asked, the reason it's confusing is, first of all, obviously, woke is a very fluid term and it means different things to different people, certainly far away from its original, and I would say noble intention of being aware of racial inequality and whatnot, and it's moved way beyond that now into, to my mind, fascism. But they asked a bunch of questions to a bunch of young people, and the questions themselves seem very contradictory, because it's sort of saying here that university reading lists should include fewer white or European authors. This would be like a sort of
decolonise
theory. But then it says, one of the questions, trans women who compete with women in sports are not helping women's rights, which would arguably be an anti-woke statement. So all of these things that they have as woke statements, that I would say...
But they just... not that you all have to answer always universally yes, otherwise they get the idea. But these are all true.
Yeah, it's not mostly A's, mostly B's. It's not a surveying Cosmo.
That one sticks out for all the others.
You're right, it does. But generally speaking, it's about things like cultural appropriation, can a member of a privileged group adopt features or cultural elements of a less privileged group and so on.
Yes.
They're all the different facets of the woke coin, and it's just you count them up, I suppose.
This is why this article wastes so much time defining the term woke, and actually you don't need the word, because you actually just look at the values in the survey, ignore the word. The survey says, basically, if you are paying attention to cultural injustices, you're more likely to be depressed. It's just demographics. Old people who bought a house for $1,000 and now it's worth $1 million, they tend to just bottle up the emotions, so you'll never find out about it in the survey.
I think it's just that, Steve. Let
me finish the flip side of it, is that the young people talk about anxiety all the time, and it will manifest itself more.
Yeah, I think there is definitely an epidemic of young people who have an elevated sense of fairness or unfairness. You know, we all know that kind of feeling of hot tears of injustice burning your cheeks, you know, where it's not fair. This has been weaponised, activated to a monstrous extent. At a time in history, it's nothing to do with the fact that they can't buy a house for £1,000. It's to do... The irony, the paradox is that there has never been a time in history when opportunity was more widely distributed, when legal rights were more widely and uniformly protected. All of the things which people see are the results of the universe not being fair, and yet they feel that they are living in an era when unfairness. That is a recipe for mental illness. That is a recipe for disaster.
But also, your point explains why they should be happy. This survey looks at the fact that they have anxiety, and I think if you spend your life paying more attention to anxiety rather than another group who rather not bottles it up necessarily, but doesn't fixate on it, it will manifest itself in your life more.
See, I've got a different theory, that they're all stupid.
You need
they are
the
finished.
Coddling of the American Mind, which I recommend on an almost monthly basis on this show. The Wednesday's Guardian now, and Damien Hirst's famous pickles are not quite the vintage he had suggested, Steve.
So the formaldehyde animals, some of these works were dated in the 90s. They've been on display, but they were actually made in 2017, according to The Guardian, who's gone in on this. They've done an investigation exclusive.
On the front page.
Exclusive, because the other newspapers don't care. And how do they know that they're dated? They're in formaldehyde. They would have kept fairly well anyway. But no, they've looked into it. These works didn't even exist before. The dates that are on the artwork are put there because that's when this is conceptual art, so it's the date when it was concepted.
Yes, I'm just playing devil's advocate. I think there may be a grain of truth to that. It's a little bit like saying, how old is this sonata? Well, it's not like the CD, is it? It's not like the violin. It's when it was composed. It's an idea. Hirst's artwork, which I'm not that fond of, it is sort of a set of instructions, really. There we are, a picture of the shark, and it's like, imagine a shark in a tank full of formaldehyde. It doesn't really matter if it's the same one.
But the interesting thing is that what they're saying here is that they were actually told to, the people who made this stuff in 2017 were told to age it.
OK.
And to make it look, and actually to the point where it was commented on and seen as sort of being a bit worse for wear.
Yeah.
And the stuff actually does degrade quite a lot. Anyway, so it is a little bit weird. I don't really understand why he would do it. It's a very conscious decision. Maybe he just wanted to put more of his art out there, create it, and sort of say, but that's the old that's not what I'm focusing on anymore, but I can still make a bit of money out of it. I don't know.
Because stuff he made in the 90s is worth more than stuff he's made now. So if he can make it look like it's from the 90s, this is 90... His best days were in the 90s, and we can all share that feeling, can't we?
It's infuriating. I've had to throw away, you know, about 3 or 4 jars of various pickles recently. In the 90s.
Put a shark in.
Whereas hers are just going up and up. On to the Sun, and doctors haven't a clue what's going on here.
Oh, my God.
Dear.
This story just goes on and on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mystery Havana syndrome mystery deepens as victims' symptoms are real and profound but don't show up on brain scans. So this is the long COVID story that we had the other day. Well, it's not but at all. But essentially, between 2016 Long Cuba, 2016 to 2018, lots of staff in the US consulate had quite serious medical effects, and people have been trying to study this for a while. They're sort of saying it could be Russia, it could be some kind of directed microwave, but they've never fully identified what it is. And this article here just basically says, yeah, it's real, but we got no evidence it's real.
So there's no new news, but
at
it's
all.
Still going on.
Well, they've now done brain scans.
Sorry?
They've now done brain scans, and they've found out that there's no physical impact on the body. So actually, it leads you towards thinking mass hysteria, but on a smaller group, that if you are working under these conditions and someone suggests to you, people who work here often have a bad thing where they hear sounds, that maybe it manifests that way. There's nothing physically wrong.
I do remember the Gulf War syndrome, which was a thing similar to being exposed to sheep dip, wasn't it, if I remember rightly? There was a particular chemical that had been used or something, and they spent decades trying to prove that it had actually made them ill. It can be incredibly frustrating for people, joking aside, if they are convinced they have something and they're not getting taken.
Might be hearing salsa too much.
Telegraph now, and the debate continues on how we should cover transgender women. Personally, I recommend a tasteful choker, gloves, and a good quality wig.
Justin Webb from the BBC, and the trans row causing meltdown. What happened was he's on Radio 4's Today programme. They're talking about the issue. He says trans women, in other words, males. Boom, that's it, too much. That triggers some people. You know what they're like, they complain straight away.
A person.
Yeah,
one person.
Very angry complaints. And the BBC does what the BBC does and goes, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then beats itself up. That finding him guilty of giving the impression of endorsing one viewpoint upset people. They complained, because this is what it's like. One person complains. And so this is a situation where... because of the use of English language, where male is somehow linked to sex and gender, and people are trying to separate the issues, but the words you use don't let you know which part of those two different ones you're using. This is always
Do you not feel, though, you're being very even-handed, I appreciate that, both towards trans people and also the BBC, but do you not feel that this confusion between what was 5 minutes ago perfectly well-delineated vocabulary suits one agenda rather better than the other? That they are deliberately creating a shifting sand whereby you can no longer stake out your territory and go, trans women, which for the benefit of older listeners, we mean males who are identifying as women. That is as close as anyone can get, and yet, no, that even that will become...
No, but I think that would have been fine. We're reading the thing that he said, trans women, in other words, males, it's just... he left a gap. If he would have said biological males, surely no one could have touched him. If he'd have said the words that you said, no one could have...
The word male is a biological term. It's not a gendered term. It's a biological word. That's... And you have to defend that. I know what you're going, and then...
No, I'm thinking if someone said...
This is logos. This is what civilization is built on, the ability to communicate using words that have meant things for thousands of years.
I'm sticking to this issue of male isn't a gendered term, is what you said. No,
of course it's not. It's a sex term. It's a biological sex term.
Then I'm asking you to describe someone just using their gender. You'd still use the word male, wouldn't you?
No, I would say men, but I would say trans if we were talking about including men and trans men. I don't believe in it. I'm against it.
Yeah.
But,
I was thinking...
But even if you are not, that word has a specific meaning. Male means biological.
Can I say that there's a few things to this story, and I agree with Simon, but the reason what the story is really about is that senior journalists at the BBC have got very upset about this. They see, and as he and women, female journalists have sort of basically written a bunch of letters. He himself has basically said there is another agenda here. I'd say that, Justin Webb, you're welcome to join GB News. You can call trans women male as much as you want.
That's good. We'll be back in a moment for the final section. Peppa Pig is up on the slab, consumed by hate, as are actual snake bites. Better than narcotics, and the problem with rimming. I can't believe we'll be covering it, but we'll see how I manage to navigate my way around it. See you in a couple of minutes.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Is a debate on gender really a far-right issue?
Far right. I'm so bored of that phrase, you know what I mean? Like, anyone who talks about... anyone who acknowledges that there are two sexes is suddenly far right, because that's what Hitler and Mussolini were all about. This question from Shirley is, of course, about Labour. They've been accused of being undemocratic because they pressured a pub into cancelling a debate, and this debate features Kelly J. Keane, who's been on this show a couple of times, and she's a campaigner, and she was just on the panel, and then they got a letter saying that they couldn't do it because Kelly J. Keane apparently attracts far-right groups. Now, they've tried this trick before, but because some awful, ghastly neo-Nazi types turned up near to an event that she was holding in Australia, they kind of tried to blame that on her and suggest that the two were the same thing. They weren't. That was an opportunistic group turning up to... they're not... neo-Nazis aren't pro-feminist. They're not pro an event called Let Women Speak. That's just ridiculous.
New Zealand's TV blurred her touching her zip because they said that her touching her zip was a far-right dog whistle because she's making that symbol.
Yeah, but she wasn't making the symbol, she was just adjusting a zip.
Yeah,
and
also, this isn't a far-right symbol.
I mean, that was incredible because she obviously wasn't making that symbol anyway. She was just adjusting a top. But this New Zealand news channel blurred out the hand so that they could pretend that it was some horrible ghastly...
Yeah.
I mean, this is low stuff, isn't it?
She's talked about having voted Labour in the past. She's so not far right.
But also,
I mean,
even if she were right-wing, which she
Yes.
isn't, why would they be banning a panel where there's a discussion about one of the most important issues of our day? What are Labour playing at here?
They're anti-democratic, aren't they? They're just kind of playing whack-a-mole with things they don't like. I think maybe I'll write to the pub and say I do want to see Kelly J. Keane there.
Yeah, but they won't listen to you
Well,
if
no,
you say
they
that,
won't,
will
they
they? Because
won't.
you've got the unfashionable opinion, Chris.
Well, and the unfashionable workplace.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. For one more section, we will jump back into the Daily Mail now, Josh. Do parents come over to yours for a full inspection before allowing their kids over?
No, strangely not, but they haven't met me, so that's probably why. My daughter wants to have a friend over for a sleepover. Her parents want to come over first, do a full inspection. This is a single dad, and his 8-year-old daughter wanted to have a sleepover. I think... You know what? I got to be honest. Like, if there was
a single dad, is that the thing?
Yeah, it's like I don't know. Like, to be 8 years old, like, any parent and and also there's a difference of girls, boys.
Them. I mean, I would never.
Yeah, if they were
we never sent our children off to people whose houses we hadn't already just.
Yeah, so fair enough. Yeah, if they were like friends and you trust them and you know them, but just sending them off to some random parent is.
Yeah, this is why I say both of you camp in the park. And then, you know, that solves that problem. Right?
Good luck to you. There is that weird double standard, though, about being a dad. Like,
I understand, but it's not weird. It's a statistically supported standard, isn't it?
But it's
men are responsible for vastly more. And I mean, I'm not saying all horrible, but vastly more, the full spectrum from dysfunctional to abusive. It's always the men.
But it's good that these news paper articles talk about it.
Not if you're watching the BBC.
Because it's not even talked about normally. So our son's in nursery, and my missus was speaking to a friend saying, sometimes when I go in there, I have a little look in the window to see if I can see him playing, don't you? No, as a grown man, I do not stand near a nursery and stare through the window. So there's some things we can't do.
They carry on doing that. Ours are 16 and 19, and Kate basically monitors them on apps and things to try and work out where they are and what they're doing. It's insane. They never leave it.
Yeah.
But yeah, OK, we give our permission, basically, if we don't think he's weird. On the Metro next, Josh, and there's a story about an STD-riddled music festival. It seems the only instrument played here was the rusty trombone.
Ooh! At least 230 people fall ill after disease spreads by faeces and it hits a music festival. This is the Esoteric Festival. And it's...
Well named.
Yes, well, this is it. It can be spread by touching a mouth with infected faeces, or sexually by oral to bottom contact. So the Esoteric Festival is described as a psychedelic music, arts and lifestyle gathering and an oral to bottom festival.
Well, that is extraordinary. Anything to say on that, Steve?
It's not described that way.
Double checking that you said arts.
Is that kind of... Oh, yeah,
arts,
good. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I booked tickets.
Good. Thank goodness that is in Australia. Well, the show is nearly over.
Safe from here.
Let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. The Telegraph has the diversity drive that's backfired, warns Badenoch. The Guardian, social media blamed for surge in young people hit by midlife crisis. I take issue with that. Express, Prince focuses on driving forward and not on Kate rumours. The Metro, first cyber flasher jailed. The iNews, Reeves, we won't repeat the mistakes of New Labour. And the Daily Star, world goes mad after woman goes shopping. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Josh Howie and Steve Allen. Andrew Doyle will be here tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Steve and Nick Dixon. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you for your company. Have a very good night. See you again soon. Good night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest GB News forecast from the Met Office. Cloud will thicken for many of us over the next 24 hours, turning damp, but the rain does ease later on. Now, we're going to see a weather system approach from the southwest, associated with an area of low pressure that's forming at the moment. And that's going to push a finger of rain into much of Wales, southwest England, and then overnight Northern Ireland, southern, eventually central Scotland, as well as parts of the Midlands and East Anglia. Now, the far southeast, likely to stay mainly dry, 10 Celsius here, and the far northwest of Scotland also dry with clear spells, a touch of frost as we start off Wednesday. That's the best place for any bright weather first thing. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud cover, those spells of rain continuing through the morning, turning heavy for a time across parts of Wales and northern England before eventually the rain fragments and pulls away, but it does tend to stay damp across this central swathe of the UK. A few showers elsewhere, but actually Western Scotland, Northern Ireland brightening up nicely, feeling fresh here, but feeling warm in the southeast where there will be some afternoon sunshine and highs of 18 Celsius. Thursday's a very different day. We start the day with outbreaks of heavy rain across the northwest. Strong winds moving in as well. The rain spreading across Northern Ireland and Scotland during the morning and early afternoon. Thickening cloud across England and Wales, but the rain not arriving here until much later on. Friday, a return to sunny spells and blustery showers. The heaviest downpours towards the northwest, along with gusty winds.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time is ticking on your chance to win the Great British Giveaway. There's a massive £12,345 in tax-free cash to spend however you like, along with £500 in shopping vouchers for your favourite store, a games console, a pizza oven and a portable Sonos smart speaker. And the best news? You could be our next big winner, just like Phil.
Didn't quite believe it and still can't. And if I can win it, anybody can win it.
For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, Text GB-WIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Well, this is it. Farage, the Trump interview. A couple of snippets for you. Here's what he had to say about Prince Harry.
If they know something about the drugs and if he lied, they'll have to take appropriate action.
Okay. And his thoughts on October the 7th.
You wouldn't have Ukraine, you wouldn't have had Israel. The attack on October 7th would never have taken place.
And crucially, absolutely crucially, he puts to bed many of the myths about America, him and NATO.
Nope, I'm not going to pay you. We're not going to do it. We're not going to defend you. If you're not paying your bills, we're not going to defend you. It's very simple.
At first, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thanks very much indeed, and good evening to you. Well, our top story tonight concerns the economy in Britain. The Shadow Chancellor has been speaking at a meeting tonight, setting out Labour's plans for Britain's economy, saying it's like a new chapter in British history. Addressing finance leaders this evening, Rachel Reeves has been likening the challenge awaiting the next government to that faced by Margaret Thatcher